The sound of my own daughter calling me a loser through the kitchen window hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I was crouched under the hood of my old Chevy in the garage, wrench in hand, when Judy's voice cut through the evening air like a rusty blade. "Mom, just take the furniture. Dad'll never fight back. He's a loser. Walter's a real man. He'll protect us." I froze, my knuckles white around the socket wrench. 16 years old, and she already had her mother's talent for finding the exact words that would leave the deepest scars. "Nice to know your kid thinks you're a doormat. Guess I should have skipped those softball games and bought a damn cape." Through the grimy garage window, I could see Kayla pacing around our kitchen. My kitchen, in the house my mother Brenda still technically owned. My wife of 18 years was gesturing wildly with her phone, probably texting her new boyfriend Walter Anderson, the flashy car salesman who thought gold chains and cheap cologne made him God's gift to married women. "Aaron's just going through a phase," Kayla was saying, her voice carrying that dismissive tone I'd grown to hate. "He'll sign whatever papers I put in front of him. He always does." I wiped my greasy hands on my coveralls and stepped closer to the window. The factory shift had been brutal today. 12 hours of grinding metal and shouting supervisors, and coming home to this felt like walking into a second job I never applied for. My phone buzzed. A text from Walter himself. "Tell the factory boy to pack his tools. Real men don't need to get their hands dirty." The arrogance of it made my jaw clench. Walter Anderson, who couldn't change his own oil if his life depended on it, mocking me for actually working for a living. I've been supporting Kayla's dreams for years while she climbed the social ladder at her marketing job. And this was my reward, being replaced by a used car salesman with delusions of grandeur. I scrolled up through their message thread, my stomach turning with each exchange I found. Months of planning, months of them laughing about my factory stink and my loser mentality. Months of Kayla describing intimate details of our marriage to this stranger, mocking everything from my work clothes to my mother's old-fashioned cooking. But the worst part? They'd been planning to take the house. My family's house, where I'd grown up, where my father had taught me to fix engines in this very garage. Kayla knew the deed was in my mother's name, but she'd convinced Walter that she could manipulate me into signing it over. "He's too weak to fight," one of her messages read. "Always has been. That's why I married him. Predictable and controllable." Predictable and controllable. 18 years of marriage reduced to a performance review from hell. I heard the front door slam and watched through the window as Walter's gaudy red Mustang pulled into my driveway. The man himself climbed out, all swagger and cheap jewelry, straightening his leather jacket like he was walking into a nightclub instead of another man's home. Through the kitchen window, I watched him grab Kayla around the waist and kiss her like they were teenagers. My wife, still legally my wife, melted into his arms right there in front of our daughter, who giggled and took pictures with her phone. "This is going on TikTok," Judy announced. "Everyone needs to see how happy Mom is now." That was it. The last thread of my patience snapped like an overstretched cable. I grabbed my toolbox and headed for Walter's Mustang. If they wanted to play games in my house, they could deal with the consequences. The tire iron felt solid in my hand as I knelt beside his front wheel. One quick puncture, nothing dramatic, just enough to make his night a little less perfect. As I worked, I caught sight of Gordon, my nosy neighbor, watching from his porch with his phone out. The old gossip was probably already composing his Facebook post about the drama next door. In a town this small, everyone would know about Walter's flat tire before he even discovered it. I left a note under his windshield wiper. "You break it, you bought it, eh?" Walking back to the garage, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, a sense of control. Small and petty, maybe, but mine. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Kayla. "Nice try, Aaron. Next time try growing a pair." I stared at the message, feeling something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. They thought this was funny. They thought I was still the same pushover who'd spent years nodding and smiling while his life got dismantled piece by piece. They wanted a villain? Fine. I'd burn the whole damn circus down. The whispers started at the factory the next morning. By the time I clocked in, half the floor had already heard about my domestic situation through the small-town gossip network that moved faster than the internet. Hey, Aaron, called out Mike Stevens from the welding station, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Heard your wife's got herself a new hobby. The laughter that followed felt like sandpaper on my nerves. Mike had been my friend for 15 years, but apparently loyalty didn't survive the entertainment value of a good scandal. Mind your own business, Stevens, I muttered, pulling on my safety goggles. Just saying, man, if my wife was stepping out, I'd want to know. Mike's grin was all teeth and malice. Course, maybe you already knew. Maybe you're into that sort of thing? The wrench in my hand felt heavy enough to solve several problems at once, but I forced myself to focus on the engine block in front of me. Getting fired wouldn't help anyone, especially not with Kayla already planning to take me for everything I had. My phone buzzed with a text from Judy. Dad, stop embarrassing us. Everyone at school is talking about your jealous tantrum. Jealous tantrum. My own daughter describing my reaction to her mother's affair like I was the problem. Apparently, my only job now is paying bills and holding doors for the new king. The lunch break brought no relief. I sat alone at my usual table while my former friends huddled together, shooting glances in my direction and whispering like high schoolers. Tom Bradley, who'd been my best man at my wedding, actually turned his back when I tried to approach. Come on, Tom. We've been friends since grade school. He shook his head without looking at me. Kayla told Jennifer what you did to Walter's car. Said you've been getting violent, threatening her. I got kids to think about, Aaron. Can't have that kind of drama in my life. What kind of drama? A slashed tire? It's not just the tire, man. It's the pattern. The anger. Jennifer says Kayla's scared of what you might do next. The lie hit me like a physical blow. Kayla, scared of me. The woman who'd been systematically destroying our marriage for months was now playing the victim, and my best friend was buying it wholesale. You know me better than that. I thought I did. Tom finally looked at me, and I saw genuine fear in his eyes. But people change, Aaron, especially when they're desperate. By the time I got home, Kayla had already moved half our furniture out. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Empty spaces where our couch and coffee table used to be. Picture frames missing from the walls, even the good dishes gone from the kitchen cabinets. Judy was in her room, door locked, music blasting. When I knocked, she shouted, "Go away! I'm not talking to you until you apologize to Mom and Walter." I found Kayla in our bedroom, packing her clothes into suitcases I'd bought for our honeymoon trip to Florida 18 years ago. Moving out? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Moving on, she corrected without looking up. Something you should try. This is still my house, Kayla. My mother's house, technically. For now, she smiled, and it was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. Walter's lawyer says we have a strong case for spousal support and property division, especially with your recent behavior. Recent behavior? The threats, the vandalism, the violent outbursts at work. She ticked off each accusation on her perfectly manicured fingers. I've been documenting everything, Aaron. Building a case. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She'd been planning this character assassination as carefully as she'd planned the affair, turning my friends against me, while positioning herself as the innocent victim. You're lying. Am I? Ask Tom Bradley. Ask Mike Stevens. Ask anyone who's seen your little temper tantrums lately. Kayla zipped up her suitcase and finally looked at me. You did this to yourself, Aaron. I just gave people permission to see who you really are. That evening, I drove to Murphy's Bar, the local watering hole where I'd celebrated my 21st birthday and my wedding bachelor party. I needed a drink and maybe some friendly faces, people who knew me before Kayla's poison started spreading. But even at Murphy's, the atmosphere felt different. Conversations stopped when I walked in. The bartender, Sally Murphy, gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The usual, Aaron? I nodded and took a seat at the far end of the bar, nursing my beer and trying to ignore the whispered conversations happening around me. The local news was playing on the TV, something about a factory closure in the next county. But I couldn't focus on anything except the growing certainty that my life was falling apart faster than I could fix it. Then Walter and Kayla walked in. They made an entrance like they owned the place, Walter's arm around Kayla's waist, both of them laughing at some private joke. Kayla wore a dress I'd never seen before, something expensive and attention-grabbing that probably cost more than I made in a week. They took a table right in the center of the room, making sure everyone could see them. Walter ordered champagne at Murphy's bar, and made a show of toasting new beginnings and real love. I felt every eye in the place watching for my reaction. This was theater, a carefully staged performance designed to humiliate me in front of the entire town. Walter caught my eye across the room and raised his glass in a mocking salute. "To the working man," he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "May he find the courage to work on himself." The laughter that followed was like a slap. These people, my neighbors, my coworkers, people I'd known my entire life, were laughing at me, while my wife celebrated her affair in public. Something cold and sharp settled in my chest, crystallizing into a resolve I'd never felt before. They wanted a show? They wanted to see what Aaron Taylor looked like when he finally stopped being predictable and controllable? I finished my beer, left money on the bar, and walked out without a word. But as I reached the door, I heard Walter's voice one more time. "That's right, factory boy. Run along home." My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. "Kayla filed for divorce today, seeking full custody, spousal support, and half of all marital assets. We need to talk." I sat in my truck outside Murphy's bar, watching through the window as my wife and her boyfriend celebrated the destruction of my life and made a decision that would change everything. They wanted war? Let's see how they like the trenches. The first thing I did was empty our joint bank account. Every penny Kayla and I had saved together, $23,000, went into a new account in my name only. If she wanted to play hardball, she could explain to Walter how she planned to pay for those expensive dinners without my factory wages. Next came the credit cards. As the primary account holder, I canceled every single one, leaving Kayla with nothing but the maxed out store cards she'd been hiding from me. The same cards she'd used to buy Walter gifts while telling me we couldn't afford a vacation. By the time I was done with the financial housekeeping, Kayla would find herself cut off from the money she'd been spending like water. If I can't have peace, I'll settle for scorched earth. My phone rang while I was transferring the car insurance to my name only. It was Sharon Martinez from the factory's HR department, calling about my workplace behavior concerns. "Aaron, I need you to come in early tomorrow. We've had some complaints." Sharon and I had worked together for 8 years. She was smart, no nonsense, and one of the few people at the plant who'd always treated me with respect. If anyone would give me a fair hearing, it would be her. "What kind of complaints?" "The kind that required documentation. Just come in at 7, okay? Before your shift starts." I spent the rest of the evening going through Kayla's things, looking for ammunition. What I found was better than I'd hoped for. Hidden in her jewelry box was a stack of credit card statements showing thousands in debt I'd never known about. Designer purses, expensive dinners, weekend trips to hotels while I was working overtime. But the real treasure was her laptop, still logged into her email account. Months of correspondence with Walter, planning their affair down to the smallest detail. Messages to her sister describing me as financially useful but emotionally dead. Emails to her boss, complaining about her loser husband and his embarrassing job. The most damaging email was from last month, sent to Walter. "Aaron's so pathetic, he'll probably thank me for leaving him. He has no idea how to fight for anything." I printed everything, made copies, and stored the originals in my safety deposit box. Evidence for the divorce proceedings, but also something more valuable. Proof of who these people really were behind their public masks. My meeting with Sharon the next morning went better than expected. She listened to my side of the story, reviewed the complaints against me, and shook her head in disgust. "Aaron, these are all secondhand reports from people who weren't even there. Mike Stevens says you seemed threatening, but can't point to anything specific you actually did or said. So I'm not in trouble?" "You're not in trouble, but I am curious about something." Sharon leaned back in her chair, studying me with sharp brown eyes. "How well do you know Walter Anderson?" The question caught me off guard. "Well enough to hate him. Why?" "Because his name came up in a conversation with my ex-husband last week. Turns out Walter's been running a side business, flipping cars without proper dealer licenses, using his position at the lot to access vehicles before they go to auction." I felt a slow smile spreading across my face. That sounds illegal. Very illegal. And very expensive if the state finds out. Sharon pulled a file from her desk drawer. My ex-husband works for the DMV. He's been tracking some irregularities in Walter's transactions. Why are you telling me this? Sharon's expression hardened. Because Walter Anderson cost me my marriage. He sold my husband a lemon 2 years ago, then refused to make it right when the engine died. We went into debt trying to fix it, started fighting about money, and everything fell apart from there. The pieces were falling into place. Sharon wasn't just helping me out of kindness. She had her own score to settle with Walter. What do you need from me? Nothing illegal, just some information about his current activities. Maybe some photos if you happen to see him doing business out of his home garage. I thought about Walter's house, with its circular driveway always full of different cars. I'd assumed he just liked collecting vehicles, but now it made more sense. He was running an unlicensed dealership right under everyone's noses. I can do that. Good. And Aaron, whatever else you're planning, be smart about it. Don't give them any real ammunition to use against you. That afternoon, I drove past Walter's house with a telephoto lens I'd borrowed from Gordon, my nosy neighbor. If Gordon wanted to spy on people, he could at least contribute to a worthy cause. What I saw was better than I'd hoped for. Walter was in his driveway with 2 other men, exchanging money and paperwork over a Honda Civic that still had dealer plates. One of the men handed Walter a stack of cash, while the other signed documents on the hood of the car. I took dozens of photos from different angles, making sure to capture the license plates, the money exchange, and Walter's face clearly visible in each shot. This wasn't just evidence of illegal activity, it was leverage. My phone buzzed with a text from Kayla. My credit cards aren't working. Fix this now or I'm calling my lawyer. I texted back, call whoever you want. I'm done being your ATM. Within an hour, she was at my front door, pounding hard enough to rattle the frame. When I opened it, her face was red with fury. You son of a bitch! How am I supposed to pay for groceries? Get a job, or ask your boyfriend to support you. I leaned against the doorframe, enjoying her frustration. Isn't that what real men do? This is financial abuse. This is financial responsibility. Something you should try sometime. I pulled out one of her hidden credit card statements and held it up. $17,000 in debt, Kayla? When exactly were you planning to mention that? Her face went pale. You went through my things. I went through our things, in our house, using our computer. I smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. Amazing what you can learn when you actually pay attention. Kayla tried to push past me into the house, but I blocked her path. You don't live here anymore, remember? You moved on. Judy's things are still here. Judy chose to leave with you. She can come get her things when I'm home, but you're not welcome here anymore. The look of pure hatred she gave me was almost worth 18 years of marriage. Almost. You think you're so smart, Aaron, but Walter has friends, important friends. People who can make your life very difficult. Is that a threat? It's a promise. As she stomped back to Walter's Mustang, I called out, "Tell Walter I said hi, and that I hope his business is doing well." The way she froze told me she'd gotten the message. They weren't the only ones who could play games. That evening, I sent copies of Walter's illegal car-dealing photos to the state DMV's Fraud Investigation Unit, along with a detailed report of everything I'd witnessed. I also sent copies to the IRS, since I doubted Walter was reporting all that cash income. My phone rang around midnight. Walter's number. You think you're clever, factory boy? I think I'm learning. You're a good teacher, Walter. Really showed me the value of planning ahead. You have no idea who you're messing with. Actually, I do. You're a small-time crook who got lucky with another man's wife. But luck runs out, doesn't it? There was a long pause. When Walter spoke again, his voice had lost some of its swagger. What do you want? I want you to understand that I'm not the pushover you thought I was. And I want you to know that this is just the beginning. I hung up and went to bed with a smile on my face. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities for creative problem solving. They'd wanted to see what Aaron Taylor looked like when he finally stopped being predictable and controllable. They were about to find out. The town council meeting was held every third Thursday at the community center, a drafty building that smelled like old coffee and broken dreams. Usually, about 20 people showed up to complain about potholes and noise ordinances. Tonight, the parking lot was packed. Word had gotten out that there would be entertainment at tonight's meeting. In a town this small, public drama was better than cable television. I arrived early and set up my presentation materials at the back of the room. 3 weeks of careful planning had led to this moment, and I wanted everything perfect. Sharon sat in the front row, giving me an encouraging nod. Even Gordon, my nosy neighbor, had shown up with his camera ready. Kayla and Walter walked in together, both dressed like they were attending a business meeting instead of a small-town council session. They took seats in the middle of the room, surrounded by their new circle of friends, people who'd embraced them as the victims of my abusive behavior. Judy came in behind them, looking uncomfortable in a dress I'd never seen before. My daughter had been avoiding me for weeks, but tonight she'd have to listen whether she wanted to or not. Tom Bradley and Mike Stevens sat together near the door, probably planning to leave early if things got too heated. My former best friends had made their choice, but they were about to learn the cost of betraying 18 years of loyalty. Mayor Patricia Wells called the meeting to order and worked through the usual agenda items. New stop signs, budget approvals, permits for the summer festival. I waited patiently, knowing my moment would come. "Is there any new business?" Mayor Wells asked, looking around the room. I stood up. "I'd like to address the council about a matter of public safety." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't how these meetings usually went, but Mayor Wells nodded for me to continue. "Thank you. My name is Aaron Taylor, and I've lived in this town my entire life. I work at the factory, I pay my taxes, and I've always tried to be a good neighbor and citizen." I paused, looking around the room at faces I'd known for decades. "Recently, I've learned some things about people in our community that I think everyone should know. Things about fraud, theft, and the kind of behavior that hurts all of us." Walter started to stand up, but Kayla pulled him back down. They both looked nervous, which was exactly what I wanted. "First, I want to talk about financial fraud." I pulled out my first poster board covered with enlarged photos of Walter's illegal car deals. These photos show Walter Anderson conducting unlicensed vehicle sales from his home, avoiding taxes and dealer regulations that the rest of us have to follow. The room erupted in whispers. Walter's face went red, but he stayed seated. "I've reported this to the appropriate authorities, but I thought the community should know that we have someone operating an illegal business right here in our neighborhood." Mayor Wells looked confused. "Mr. Taylor, this isn't really the appropriate forum for—" "Oh, but I'm just getting started." I smiled and pulled out my second poster. "This is about something that affects all of us, the sanctity of marriage and family values that our community is built on." Kayla went pale. She knew what was coming. "My wife, Kayla Taylor, has been having an affair with Walter Anderson for 8 months. But that's not the worst part." I pulled out printed copies of their text messages, blown up large enough for everyone to read. "The worst part is how they've been planning to defraud me out of my family home and turn our daughter against me." I read directly from Kayla's messages. "Aaron's too weak to fight. I can manipulate him into signing over the house deed. He's always been predictable and controllable." The gasps from the audience were audible. Judy looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "But here's my favorite message," I continued, pulling out Walter's texts. "This is Walter describing his plan to break the factory boy and take everything I've worked for my entire life." Walter finally stood up. "This is harassment. You can't just—" "Sit down, Walter." My voice carried an authority I'd never known I possessed. "I'm not done." To my surprise, he sat down. "Now, some of you might be wondering why I'm sharing this publicly instead of handling it privately. The answer is simple. They didn't give me that choice." I pulled out my final poster, showing screenshots of social media posts. My own daughter has been posting videos on TikTok, mocking me and encouraging her friends to share stories about what a loser her father is. Judy started crying, but I pressed on. My former friends, Tom Bradley and Mike Stevens, chose to believe lies about me being violent and dangerous, rather than asking for my side of the story. Tom and Mike both looked uncomfortable, But they didn't leave. And my wife has been telling anyone who will listen that I'm abusive, controlling, and unstable, all while she steals from our joint accounts to pay for hotel rooms with her boyfriend. The room was completely silent now. Even Mayor Wells seemed too stunned to interrupt. So I want everyone to understand something very clearly. I am not the victim here. I'm not asking for sympathy or support. I'm simply making sure that when people talk about Aaron Taylor, they have all the facts. I walked to the center of the room, looking directly at Kayla and Walter. You wanted everyone to know what kind of man I really am? Fine. I'm the kind of man who keeps receipts. I'm the kind of man who plans ahead. And I'm the kind of man who finishes what other people start. Walter tried one more time to stand up, but I held up my hand. Before you say anything, Walter, you should know that the DMV and IRS investigators will be contacting you next week. I've provided them with everything they need to shut down your little side business and audit your tax returns for the past 5 years. His face went from red to white in seconds. And Kayla, since you're so concerned about financial security, you should know that I've documented every penny you've stolen from our joint accounts. My lawyer says it's enough to eliminate any claim you might have to spousal support. Kayla finally found her voice. You bastard! You can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply telling the truth. I smiled, feeling genuinely peaceful for the first time in months. Something you two should try sometime. The room erupted in chaos. People were shouting, taking pictures with their phones, demanding answers from Walter and Kayla. Mayor Wells was banging her gavel, trying to restore order. But I was done. I'd said everything I came to say. As I walked toward the exit, Sharon caught up with me. That was incredible, Aaron. How do you feel? Like myself again, I said, and meant it. Behind us, I could hear Kayla screaming at Walter, blaming him for everything. Judy was sobbing while Tom Bradley tried to comfort her. Walter was shouting about lawsuits and revenge. But I didn't look back. I'd spent 18 years looking back, wondering what I could have done differently, how I could have been a better husband and father. Now I knew the truth. Some people can't be satisfied, no matter how much you give them. Some people will always see kindness as weakness and loyalty as stupidity. They'd called me cold, but in this town, cold iron was the only thing that cut through the lies. I walked out into the night air, leaving the wreckage of my old life behind me. Tomorrow, I'd start building something new, something that belonged entirely to me. And if anyone else wanted to test my resolve, they were welcome to try. I'd learned a lot about myself in the past few weeks. Most importantly, I'd learned that Aaron Taylor was nobody's victim. Not anymore.